Close your eyes and imagine this. You're shivering so hard your bones ache. Your children are crying from the cold. The fire you've been feeding all night is dying and you have no more wood. In just a few hours, your family will freeze to death. What would you do? Would you panic? Would you give up? Or would you try something completely cruel? Something that makes no sense but just might save everyone you love? This is the true story of how one father's impossible idea changed everything. Not just for his family, but for every human who came after. And here's the strangest part. He didn't discover a new fuel or a better way to make fire. He discovered something much more powerful. He discovered that fire could listen. I know that sounds impossible. I know you're thinking, fire doesn't listen, fire just burns. But stay with me, because what happened in that freezing cave 30,000 years ago is about to blow your mind. And by the end of this story, you'll never look at a candle, a campfire, or even the light in your room the same way again. Before we begin this incredible journey together, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because I share stories like this every week. Stories that make you think, that help you relax, and that remind you of the amazing things humans can do when we refuse to give up. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. I love knowing that people all around the world are here together, sharing this quiet moment. Are you in bed right now, sitting by a window? Let me know what time it is where you are. Also, if you've been struggling to fall asleep lately, you're not alone. Our modern world has messed up our natural sleep rhythms. But here's something cool. I've created a 7-day caveman sleep challenge based on the exact sleep principles our ancestors used. It resets your body's natural rhythm so you fall asleep faster, sleep deeper, and wake up actually feeling rested. If you want to start tonight, I've got a 1-day caveman reset you can download right now. Just check the link in the description. And if you're ready for the full transformation, the complete 7-day challenge is waiting there too. Trust me, your sleep is about to get so much better. Now, let's go back 30,000 years to a cave in the frozen north, where a father named Kael was about to make a discovery that would echo through all of human history. Chapter 1. The Night Everything Changed. Kael wasn't special. That's the first thing you need to know. He wasn't the strongest hunter in his tribe, he wasn't the smartest. He wasn't a leader or a warrior or anyone important. He was just a father trying to keep his family alive through another brutal winter. And this winter was the worst anyone could remember. The snow had been falling for 3 full moons without stopping. The hunters couldn't find game, the river was frozen solid, and the wood, the precious wood they needed for fire, was almost gone. Kael sat in the small cave where his family huddled together for warmth. His mate, Nira, held their baby daughter close to her chest. Their 2 sons, both under 5 years old, were curled up under every animal skin they owned, but they were still shivering. His own father, old and weak, sat in the corner coughing, his breath coming out in white clouds. The fire was dying. Again, Kael had fed it the last piece of dry wood an hour ago, and now there was nothing left but glowing embers that got dimmer every time he looked at them. "How much longer?" Nira asked quietly. She didn't need to finish the question. They both knew what she meant. How much longer until the fire goes out? How much longer until we freeze? Kael didn't answer. He couldn't tell her the truth, that they might not survive the night. He stared at those dying embers and felt something break inside him. Not his spirit exactly, something different. It was like a wall in his mind crumbled, and suddenly he was thinking thoughts that made no sense. Desperate thoughts, crazy thoughts. What if fire isn't just fire? What if it's alive somehow? What if I'm doing this all wrong? He'd been taught since childhood how to make fire, how to feed it, how to keep it burning. You give it wood, you give it air, you protect it from wind and water. That's it. That's all anyone had ever done. But clearly that wasn't enough anymore. So Kael did something no one had ever done before. He started talking to the fire, not yelling at it, not commanding it, just talking the way you'd talk to a scared animal or a sick child. "Please," he whispered, leaning close to the embers. "Please don't go out. We need you. My children need you. Just stay with us a little longer." His father coughed in the corner. "Kael, what are you doing?" "I don't know," Kael admitted, "but I have to try something." He thought about what makes living things want to stay alive. Food, warmth, care, attention. What if fire wanted the same things? He'd always just shoved wood at the flames and expected them to burn. But what if fire needed more than that? He reached for his leather pouch and pulled out a small chunk of animal fat he'd been saving. It was precious. They could have eaten it. But something told him to try this instead. He held the fat over the embers and let 3 small drops fall onto the glowing coals. The drops sizzled. A beautiful smell filled the cave, rich and warm, like roasting meat. And the embers, those dying embers, suddenly flared brighter. Just for a moment, but definitely brighter. Kael's heart pounded. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Neera leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Do it again." He let 3 more drops fall. Again the embers glowed stronger. It was working. It was actually working, but why? What was different? That's when Kael realized something that would change everything. It wasn't just the fat, it was the attention, it was the care. He'd spent months fighting with the fire, frustrated with it, angry at it for dying all the time. But the moment he started treating it like something precious, like something he was grateful for, it responded differently. "Thank you," he whispered to the embers. "Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for keeping my family warm." The temperature in the cave seemed to shift, not dramatically, but everyone felt it. The cold wasn't pressing in quite so hard anymore. The air near the fire shimmered with the gentle heat that spread slowly toward where the children slept. By morning, something impossible had happened. The embers were still glowing. Usually they would have died hours ago, but these embers that had been spoken to with gratitude and fed with care, refused to die. Kael sat there as dawnlight crept into the cave, and he knew his life had just changed forever. He'd discovered something powerful, something that had been there all along, waiting for someone to notice it. Fire could listen, or maybe Kael could finally hear what fire had been trying to tell humans for thousands of years. Either way, his family had survived the night, and that was just the beginning. Chapter 2: The Discovery of the Impossible. For 3 days, Kael kept his discovery secret. Every evening as darkness fell, he would sit beside the fire and talk to it, not loud enough for the others to hear clearly, just soft murmurs of gratitude and care. "You're doing well," he'd whisper. "Look how strong you are tonight. The children are warm because of you. Thank you for staying with us." And every night, the fire burned longer and hotter than it should have. The same amount of wood that used to last only a few hours now lasted through the entire night. The cave stayed warmer. The smoke wasn't as harsh. Even the flames seemed to dance differently, moving with a rhythm that almost looked purposeful. His son started noticing. The older one, Taro, watched his father one evening and asked, "Papa, why do you talk to the fire?" Kael smiled. "Because it listens." "Fire can't listen, Papa. It's not alive." "Are you sure?" Kael gestured to the flames. "Look at how it moves. Doesn't it look like it's breathing? Doesn't it seem like it's trying to tell us something?" Taro stared at the fire for a long moment, his young face serious. Then hesitantly he leaned forward and whispered, "Thank you for being warm." The flames jumped higher just for a second, as if excited by the child's voice. Taro gasped and laughed, and the sound of that laughter made everyone in the cave smile. It had been so long since anyone had laughed. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting, because Kael started experimenting. He wanted to understand exactly what made the fire respond. Was it just the words, the attention, the offerings of fat and food, or was it something deeper? One night he tried feeding the fire without speaking to it, just added wood silently, mechanically, the way he used to. The fire burned, but flatly. The heat didn't spread as far, the light seemed dimmer somehow. The next night he spoke to the fire but didn't add anything to it, just words of gratitude and care. And incredibly, the existing embers burned hotter and longer than they should have been able to. Not forever, obviously, fire still needs fuel, but the efficiency was remarkable. It was like the fire was trying harder because someone finally noticed it. But the real breakthrough came on the 7th night. Kael was exhausted from hunting all day in the brutal cold. They'd found nothing. Again, everyone was hungry and scared. The mood in the cave was dark, and when Kael sat down by the fire that evening, he didn't have any energy left for his nightly ritual. The fire immediately started dying, faster than usual. The flames shrank, the heat pulled back. Within an hour they were back to barely glowing embers, even though there was still wood available. "No, no, no," Kael muttered, suddenly alert. He leaned forward. "I'm sorry, I'm here. I didn't forget about you. It's just been a hard day." He placed his hand near the embers, not close enough to burn, but close enough to feel their fading warmth. And he did something he'd never done before. He told the fire the truth about how he was feeling. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "I don't know if I can keep everyone alive this winter. I'm trying so hard, but it's not enough. The food is running out. My children are hungry. My father is dying. And I feel..." As he spoke, tears ran down his weathered face. He hadn't cried in years. Men didn't cry. But here in the darkness, with only the fire as his witness, he let everything out. And something incredible happened. The embers began to glow brighter. Not because he'd added fuel, not because air had reached them, but because his honesty, his vulnerability, his real human emotion had touched something deep in the fire's nature. The warmth that spread through the cave that night was different from any they'd felt before. It wasn't just physical heat, it was comfort. It was the feeling of being heard, of not being alone. The children slept more peacefully that night than they had in weeks. His father's coughing eased. Even Nira, who'd been silent and withdrawn for days, reached over and squeezed Kael's hand. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I was honest," Kael said simply. "I think that's what fire wants from us. Not just wood and fat. It wants our truth, our attention, our gratitude. It wants to know it matters." Think about how revolutionary this was. For thousands of years, humans had treated fire as a tool, something to use, something to control, but Kael discovered that fire was more like a relationship. The more you put into it, the more you got back. The more you cared for it, the more it cared for you. Now, before we continue with what happened next, I want you to hit that like button if you're finding this story fascinating. Seriously, it helps more people discover these stories, and it takes just 1 second. Go ahead, I'll wait. Got it? Awesome, thank you. Also, think about this question, and I really want you to comment your answer below. What in your life have you been treating like a tool that might actually need to be treated like a relationship? your car, your home, your body, maybe even the people around you. Drop your thoughts in the comments because I read every single one. Okay, so Kael had made this incredible discovery, but he was about to face his biggest challenge yet, because not everyone in the tribe believed him, and some people were about to make things very difficult. Chapter 3: When Fire Learned to Listen. Word spread fast in the small tribe. Within days, everyone knew that Kael was doing something strange with his fire. Some people were curious, but one person was furious. His name was Gareth, and he was everything Kael wasn't. Tall, muscular, confident, the best hunter in the tribe and someone who never questioned the old ways. Gareth showed up at Kael's cave one morning, his face twisted with anger. "I hear you've been talking to fire like it's a person." Kael stood up slowly, keeping his body between Gareth and his family. "I talk to the fire, yes, and it works. My family hasn't been cold in over a week." "It's madness," Gareth spat. "Fire is fire. You give it wood, it burns. That's all there is to it. You're filling people's heads with nonsense, making them think there's some magic trick when really you're just hoarding the good firewood." "I'm not hoarding anything. Come see for yourself." Gareth stomped into the cave, his eyes scanning for evidence of hidden wood piles. But there was nothing, just a small normal fire burning in the centre of the space. And yet the cave was warm, genuinely warm. His own cave, even with twice as much wood burning, was never this comfortable. "How are you doing this?" Gareth had demanded. "I told you. I talk to it. I care for it. I treat it with gratitude and respect, and it burns better because of it." Gareth laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You expect me to believe that? Fire doesn't have feelings. It doesn't listen to words. You're either lying or crazy." "Then try it yourself," Kael said calmly. "Go back to your cave tonight. Sit by your fire. Talk to it the way I do. See what happens." "I'm not going to talk to fire like an idiot." "Then your fire will keep dying, and your family will keep being cold. Your choice." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Finally, Gareth turned and stormed out, but something in his eyes had changed. Not belief, but the tiniest seed of doubt. What if Kael was right? What if there was something to this? That night, Gareth sat alone by his fire after his family had gone to sleep. His cave was freezing as always. The fire was already dying even though he'd just added fresh wood. He was wasting fuel, again, and he knew it. He looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then, feeling ridiculous, he leaned toward the flames and muttered, "Fine, if you can actually hear me burn better." Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. He'd known it wouldn't. This was stupid. Kael was a fool and Gareth was a fool for even trying. He started to stand up to go to bed, but then something made him stop. What if the problem wasn't that fire couldn't listen? What if the problem was how he was talking to it? He'd spoken like he was giving an order to a slave, but Kael had spoken with gratitude and respect. Could that really make a difference? Gareth sat back down, feeling more foolish than ever, but he was desperate. His family was cold, his children cried every night. His mate looked at him with disappointment in her eyes because he couldn't keep them warm. If there was even a tiny chance this could work, he had to try. "Okay," he said quietly, his voice completely different now. "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if this makes any sense, but I want to say thank you for the warmth you give us, for the light that keeps the darkness away, for the way you cook our food and keep us alive. I've never thanked you before. I just expected you to burn because that's what fire does. But Kael is right. You work hard for us, and I'm grateful. The words felt strange coming out of his mouth, but as he spoke them, something shifted in his chest. Whoa! A tightness he didn't know was there started to release, and the fire, his fire that had been dying just moments before, steadied. The flames grew slightly taller. The heat spread slightly further. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't magic, but it was real. Gareth felt it. And for the first time in his life, this strong, proud hunter felt tears sting his eyes. "You did hear me," he whispered in wonder. "You actually heard me." From that night on, Gareth became one of Kael's strongest supporters. When others in the tribe mocked the practice of talking to fire, Gareth would defend it fiercely. "I didn't believe it either," he'd say, "but it works. Try it yourself before you judge." And slowly, person by person, family by family, the whole tribe started doing it. Every evening, as darkness fell, you could walk through the camp and hear soft voices murmuring to their fires, words of gratitude, words of care. Sometimes people would even sing to their fires, gentle songs that their grandmothers had taught them. The results were undeniable. The tribe's firewood lasted twice as long as it used to. The caves stayed warmer, people slept better. Even the smoke seemed less harsh, causing fewer coughs and breathing problems. The children started playing a game where they'd sit in a circle around the fire, and each person would tell it something they were grateful for that day. But here's the most interesting part, and this is where the story gets really deep. As people started treating their fires with more care and respect, they started treating each other differently too. Arguments decreased, people were kinder, families that had barely spoken to each other for years started sharing meals. It was like the practice of gratitude and attention that they gave to their fires spilled over into every other relationship in their lives. One of the elders, a woman named Mara, who was so old she remembered when the tribe was twice its current size, sat Kael down one day and told him something that gave him chills. "What you've discovered," she said, her ancient eyes gleaming in the firelight, "is bigger than fire. You've discovered that everything responds to care. Everything in this world, fire, animals, plants, people, the earth itself, everything gets better when we stop treating it like a tool and start treating it like it matters." Kael thought about her words for a long time, and he realized she was right. The fire hadn't actually changed. Fire was fire doing what fire does. What had changed was the humans. By learning to pay attention, to be grateful, to care about something as simple as the flames that warmed them, they had become better versions of themselves. But the winter wasn't over yet. In fact, the hardest test was still to come, and it would take every bit of this newfound wisdom to survive what happened next. Chapter 4. The Stranger Who Doubted. The snow stopped falling on the night of the new moon. After endless weeks of white skies and howling wind, the world went completely silent. The tribe celebrated, thinking the worst was over. They sang around their fires, shared extra rations, and told stories late into the night. But Kael couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The silence felt wrong somehow, too complete, like the world was holding its breath before something terrible happened. He stood at the entrance of his cave that night, looking out at the frozen landscape, and felt his stomach twist with fear. He was right to be worried. 3 days later, the cold hit. Not regular cold, not winter cold, something else entirely. A cold so deep and brutal that it turned breath to ice crystals before it left your mouth. A cold that made the rocks themselves crack and split. A cold that could kill you in minutes if you weren't careful. The tribe huddled in their caves, fires burning as high as they dared. But even with their new practices, even with all their grateful words and careful attention, the cold was winning. People started getting sick. Frostbite blackened fingers and toes, and the firewood, already scarce, was running out fast. That's when the stranger arrived. Nobody knew where he came from. One morning he was just there, standing at the edge of their camp, half frozen and barely alive. The tribe brought him to the largest cave where the strongest fire burned, and they worked for hours to warm him back to life. When he could finally speak, his words chilled them more than the cold outside ever could. "My tribe is gone," he said, his voice rough and prawn. "All of them dead. The cold took them in one night. They never woke up." The tribe members looked at each other in horror. If an entire tribe could die in one night, what chance did they have? The stranger's eyes were haunted, empty of hope. "There's nothing we can do against cold like this. It's too powerful. We're all going to die. It's just a matter of time." "No," Kael said firmly. "We've survived this far. We'll survive this too." The stranger laughed bitterly. "How? By talking to your fires?" Someone had told him about their practice. "You think words will save you from this? You think gratitude will stop the freeze? You're all fools. Fire is just fire, and it will die, just like everything else." His words were like poison. The tribe members who'd only recently started believing in Kael's methods felt their faith waver. Maybe the stranger was right. Maybe they'd been fooling themselves. Maybe talking to fire was just a nice idea that couldn't stand up to real crisis. Kael saw the doubt spreading through his people like a disease. He had to do something. But what? How could he prove that his discovery was real when everyone was so scared? That night, he called the entire tribe together. Every person who could walk came to the central cave where the largest fire burned. Even the stranger came wrapped in borrowed furs, his face skeptical and cold. "I know you're scared," Kael said, his voice carrying through the cave. "I'm scared too. This cold is like nothing we've ever faced. And maybe the stranger is right. Maybe we're all going to die." Murmurs of fear rippled through the crowd, but Kael held up his hand. "Before we give up, I want to try something. Tonight we're all going to feed this fire together, not just with wood. With everything we have, our hope, our love for each other, our memories of better times, our dreams of spring, and yes, our fear too. Fire doesn't just want our gratitude, it wants our truth. All of it." He knelt beside the fire and placed his hand near the flames. "I'll go first. Fire, I'm terrified. I'm afraid I can't protect my family. I'm afraid my children will freeze before morning. I'm afraid this stranger is right, and all my discoveries mean nothing against real danger. But I'm also grateful. Grateful for every night you've kept us warm. Grateful for every meal you've cooked. Grateful that you're still here with us, burning even when everything else seems hopeless." As he spoke, tears ran down his face, raw emotion, unfiltered and honest. And one by one, others started joining in. Nira knelt beside him. "Fire, thank you for warming my baby. Thank you for letting me see my children's faces at night. Please, please keep burning. We need you." Taro, Kael's young son, came forward. "Fire, you're my friend. I tell you all my secrets. Don't go away." Then Gareth, the former doubter. "Fire, I was mean to you for years. I took you for granted, but you kept burning anyway. You're stronger than I ever knew." One by one, every member of the tribe came forward. They spoke their fears, their gratitude, their hopes, their pain. They told the fire things they'd never told another person. They cried, they laughed, they sang. And slowly something incredible started happening. The fire grew, not just bigger, but different. The flames turned colours nobody had seen before. deep blues and bright golds mixed with the normal oranges and reds. The heat spread through the cave like a living thing, wrapping around every person there with an almost gentle touch. Even the stranger felt it. He'd been sitting in the back, arms crossed, face set in stubborn disbelief. But as the warmth reached him, as he heard the raw honesty and emotion in these people's voices, something inside him cracked open. The wall he'd built around his heart after losing his tribe started to crumble. "I miss them," he suddenly said, his voice breaking. "I miss my tribe so much. I should have died with them. Why did I survive when they didn't?" The tribe turned to him, and their faces showed no judgment, only compassion. "Come," Kale said gently. "Come talk to the fire with us." The stranger stumbled forward and fell to his knees beside the flames. "I don't know what to say. I don't believe in this. I think it's crazy." "Then tell the fire that," Kale said. "Tell it the truth." So the stranger did. "Fire, I think this is all stupid. I think Kyle is crazy and everyone here is desperate and grasping at anything that might help. But I don't want to die, and I don't want these people to die either. So if you're really listening, if there's any truth to this at all, please keep burning just for tonight. Get us through this one terrible night." The fire roared suddenly, flames leaping high toward the cave ceiling. Everyone gasped and pulled back slightly, but they weren't afraid, they were amazed. Because the heat that poured out from those flames was unlike anything they'd ever felt. It was powerful, protective, almost fierce in its determination to keep them alive. They stayed up all night, taking turns speaking to the fire, feeding it their last reserves of wood, and most importantly, giving it their complete attention. Nobody slept. Nobody left. They stayed together in one unified group, with the fire at their center burning impossibly bright. And when morning came, when dawn light finally crept into the cave entrance, they were all still alive. Every single person. Not one had frozen. Not one had given up. They'd survived the coldest night anyone could remember, and they'd done it together, with gratitude, honesty, and a fire that refused to let them die. The stranger wept, deep shaking sobs that came from somewhere ancient and painful inside him. "It's real," he kept saying. "It's really real." That morning the cold began to break, just slightly, just enough, and the tribe knew they were going to make it through this winter after all. Chapter 5. The Children's Secret. After the night of the great cold, everything changed. The stranger, whose name they learned was Finn, stayed with the tribe. He became one of their most devoted firekeeper, spending hours each day tending the flames and teaching newcomers the practice of grateful attention. But the biggest change happened with the children. While the adults had learned to talk to fire out of desperation and necessity, the children did it naturally, joyfully, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. They didn't question whether fire could listen. They just knew it could. Taro, Kyle's oldest son, started spending every evening by the fire, telling it elaborate stories, not just speaking to it but performing for it, using different voices for different characters, making grand gestures with his small hands. And the fire seemed to respond, flickering and dancing in rhythm with his tales. Other children noticed and joined in. Soon, every evening before sleep, there was a children's hour where the young ones would gather around the fire and take turns entertaining it. They'd tell stories, sing songs, show the fire interesting rocks they'd found or pictures they'd drawn in the dirt. At first, the adults thought it was cute but pointless. The children don't understand, some said. They think the fire is actually alive like an animal. But Kyle noticed something the others missed. The children's fires burned better than anyone else's, They used less wood, produced more heat, and never seemed to go out unexpectedly. And the children themselves seemed happier, healthier, less affected by the harsh winter than the adults. One evening, Kyle pulled Taro aside. "Son, can I ask you something? Why do you talk to the fire so much? Why do you tell it stories every night?" Taro looked at his father with surprise, as if the answer was obvious. "'Cause it gets lonely, Papa." "Lonely?" "Yes, fire works so hard for us. It burns all day and all night, keeping us warm, never sleeping, never resting. That must be lonely. So I keep it company. I help it not feel so alone." Kyle felt like he'd been struck by lightning. In all his thinking about gratitude and attention, he'd never considered this. Loneliness. The fire might be lonely. It made perfect sense. Fire's whole existence was to give itself away, to burn itself up for others' benefit. What if it needed companionship in return? That night, Kale tried something new. Instead of just thanking the fire, he sat beside it the way he'd sit beside a friend. And he talked to it not about himself, but about the fire's own experience. "It must be hard," he said softly. "Burning all the time, giving and never receiving. Always being depended on, but never being asked what you need. I see you now, not just as warmth or light, but as something that exists on its own. Something that has its own experience of the world. And I want you to know you're not alone. I'm here. We're all here, and we see you." The fire's response was immediate and unmistakable. The flames grew softer, gentler, as if they were relaxing. The colour shifted to a deep, warm gold that seemed to wrap the cave in comfort. And Kyle felt something he'd never felt before from the fire. Peace. Deep, genuine peace. He told the other adults what Taro had said and what he'd discovered. Some dismissed it as too fanciful, but others tried it and they got the same results. The fires that were treated as companions, not just as tools or even as servants, burned with a special quality that was unmistakable. The children, meanwhile, had discovered something else. Taro's little sister Zara, who was barely 3 years old, had started humming to the fire. Just simple melodies, the kind small children make up as they play. But the fire responded to her humming in the most remarkable way. It would pulse in rhythm with her voice, brightening and dimming like a heartbeat, creating a visual dance that mesmerized everyone who saw it. Other children tried humming too, and soon there was a whole repertoire of fire songs. Fast songs that made the flames jump and dance, slow songs that made them sway gently, sad songs that turned the flames blue-tinged and contemplative, happy songs that filled the cave with golden light. The adults were astounded. "How did you figure this out?" Mara, the old elder, asked Zara one day. Zara looked up at her with big innocent eyes. "The fire taught me. It sings first and I sing back. Don't you hear it?" Mara listened carefully, and for the first time she did hear it. A subtle sound beneath the crackle and pop, a kind of humming tone that shifted and changed with the fire's mood. It had always been there. The children had just been paying better attention. Now I want you to think about something, and this is going to blow your mind. Comment below when you figure this out. What in your life might be trying to communicate with you right now, but you're not paying enough attention to hear it? Your body, your emotions, the natural world around you? Seriously, drop a comment. I want to know what you think. And make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm sharing another incredible story about human discovery that changed everything. You won't want to miss it. So the children had discovered that fire wasn't just something that could listen, it was something that could communicate back. And this revelation opened up an entirely new level of relationship between the tribe and their fires. The young ones started reporting things that sounded impossible but kept proving true. "The fire says a storm is coming tomorrow," Taro announced one afternoon. The adults were skeptical, but they prepared just in case. Sure enough, the next day brought the heaviest snowfall in weeks. "The fire says grandfather's cough will get better soon," Zara told her mother. 3 days later, Kael's father coughed up something dark and began breathing easier for the first time in months. "The fire says there are deer in the valley to the east," a child from another family reported. The hunters had been planning to go north, but they changed their plans and went east instead. They found a small herd and brought back enough meat to feed the tribe for a week. How were the children understanding these messages from the fire? Kael studied them carefully, trying to learn their secret. Finally, he realized the difference. The children weren't trying to interpret or analyze. They were just listening without judgment, without skepticism, without the adult need to make everything logical. They listened with their whole hearts, and the fire spoke to them in feelings and impressions that they then translated into words. Could adults learn this skill? Some tried and succeeded, others never quite got it. But everyone agreed on one thing: the children had taken Kael's discovery and evolved it into something even more profound. Fire wasn't just a companion, it was a teacher, a guide, and a friend. By midwinter, the tribe's relationship with fire had completely transformed. The flames were treated with the same respect and care they'd give to any valued member of the community. Children grew up learning to listen to fire the way they learned to listen to their parents. And the fires, those mysterious dancing energies that had kept humanity alive since the beginning, finally had what they'd always wanted: to be seen, to be heard, to be understood as more than just heat and light. The impossible thing Kael had discovered in desperation was no longer impossible. It was just how things were done, and the tribe that had almost frozen to death had become the warmest, safest group of people for hundreds of miles around. Other tribes started hearing stories, a place where fires never went out, where the cold couldn't quite reach, where children laughed even in the deepest winter. And they came slowly at first, then in larger groups, seeking to learn the secret. And Kael taught them all the same thing: talk to your fire, care for it, listen to it, treat it like it matters, because it does. Everything matters, everything responds to care. That's the secret, that's always been the secret. Chapter 6: The Longest Winter Night. The winter solstice was approaching, the longest night of the year. In the old times, before Kael's discovery, the solstice had been a night of terror. Darkness fell early and didn't lift until late the next day. More people died on solstice night than any other night of winter. The cold seemed to deepen. The darkness felt alive and hungry, and fires, even carefully tended ones, struggled to stay lit through those endless hours. But this year would be different. The tribe decided to do something that had never been done before. They would create one massive fire, pooling all their resources, and the entire tribe would stay together through the long darkness. No one alone, no one isolated in their small cave. They would face the solstice as one unified group, with one unified fire. For days before the solstice, everyone worked on preparations. The hunters brought in every scrap of burnable material they could find. The children gathered special stones that Mara said would help the fire burn hotter. The women mixed animal fat with dried herbs to create fuel cakes that would burn slow and steady. But most importantly, everyone prepared stories, because they'd decided that the fire wouldn't burn alone that night. They would keep it company with stories, songs, and shared memories from the moment darkness fell until dawn returned. When the solstice evening arrived, the whole tribe gathered in the largest cave system they knew, a vast chamber with a ceiling high enough to accommodate a truly enormous fire. As darkness began to fall, Kale stepped forward to light the first flame. His hands shook slightly as he struck the flint, not from cold or fear, but from the weight of the moment. He was about to create a fire that would need to burn for almost 18 hours straight, a fire that would keep over 60 people alive through the darkest, coldest night of the year. The spark caught, the kindling began to smoke, and as the first small flame flickered to life, everyone in the cave fell silent. Then, as they'd planned, every person there spoke one word together. Welcome, welcome, not please burn or don't go out, just welcome. Welcoming the fire into their space, into their lives, acknowledging it as an honoured guest rather than a desperate necessity. The flame grew steadily, fed by careful hands and grateful hearts. Within an hour it was roaring, massive and magnificent, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls and filling the chamber with golden light. As full darkness fell outside, the storytelling began. The elders went first, sharing tales from their youth, memories of times before the endless winter, of green summers and rivers full of fish. The hunters told stories of their greatest chases. The mothers shared memories of their children's births, and the children, those wonderful children who taught everyone so much, told elaborate fantasy tales of fire creatures and ice dragons and heroes who learned to talk to the elements. Hour after hour the stories continued. People took turns, making sure the fire always had a voice speaking to it, a presence paying attention. When someone finished a tale, everyone would chant together, "The fire remembers," and it seemed like it did. As each story was told, the flames would shift and change, as if responding to the content. Sad stories turned the flames quieter, more contemplative. Funny stories made them jump and dance. Scary stories made them hiss and pop dramatically. Around midnight, the darkest point of the longest night, something remarkable happened. A young woman named Lyra stood up to tell a story, but instead of speaking, she began to cry. Deep, wrenching soars that came from somewhere primal inside her. "I can't do this anymore," she said between gasps. "I can't pretend everything is okay. I'm so tired of being cold. I'm so tired of being hungry. I'm so tired of watching people die. When will it end? When will spring come? How much more can we take?" For a moment, everyone froze, unsure how to respond. They'd been keeping spirits high all night, pushing away the darkness with forced cheerfulness. But Lyra had just voiced what everyone was feeling deep down. The exhaustion, the despair, the question of whether they'd really survive until spring. Then Finn, the stranger who'd joined them, stood up. "Tell the fire," he said gently. "Tell the fire what you just told us." Lyra stumbled forward until she was right in front of the massive flames. "Fire!" she said, her voice raw. "I'm so angry. Angry at the cold, angry at the darkness, angry that life has to be this hard. I want to give up. Part of me wants to just walk out into the snow and let it take me. Why should we keep fighting? What's the point?" The fire roared suddenly, flames leaping higher than they'd been all night. But it wasn't threatening, it was emphatic, like the fire was saying, "I hear you, your pain is real, your anger is valid." And then something happened that no one could explain. The fire split into different colours. The centre turned deep blue, like the hottest part of a flame. But around the edges, other colours emerged. Green, purple, even a bright clear white. It was impossible. Fire doesn't turn those colours naturally. But there it was, a rainbow fire burning in the centre of the cave, responding to human pain with something that looked like empathy. Lyra fell to her knees, sobbing harder, but others began joining her. One by one, people came forward to tell the fire their real feelings, their fears, their anger, their exhaustion, all the emotions they'd been holding back, trying to stay strong. "I'm afraid I'm going to fail my family," Kael admitted. "I'm afraid my discovery wasn't enough. I'm afraid that talking to fire is just a nice story we tell ourselves while we slowly freeze to death." "I miss my mate," an old man said. "She died last winter, and every day without her is agony. I don't want to survive without her." "I'm jealous," a young hunter confessed. "Jealous of Kael and his discovery. Jealous that he's special and I'm not. And I hate that I feel that way." On and on it went. Raw, honest, painful truth pouring out in front of the fire. And the fire took it all. It didn't judge. It didn't turn away. It just burned, steady and strong, holding space for every emotion, every confession, every piece of pain that the tribe had been carrying. As dawn approached, something shifted. The cascade of pain began to transform into something else. Acceptance. Not that everything was okay, but that they'd survived the night. That they'd faced their darkest fears and were still here, still breathing, still together, when the first grey light of dawn appeared at the cave entrance. The entire tribe stood together in a circle around the fire. They were exhausted, emotionally drained, but also lighter somehow, cleaner, like they'd released something that had been poisoning them. Mara, the eldest, stepped forward. "Fire," she said, her old voice strong and clear. "Thank you for holding our darkness. Thank you for showing us that pain doesn't destroy light, that even our worst feelings can be transformed. You've taught us something tonight that goes deeper than warmth. You've taught us that healing comes from bringing our whole selves, even the broken parts, into the light." The fire settled then, returning to its normal orange and gold colours. But everyone who'd been there that night knew they'd witnessed something profound. They'd survived the longest night not by pretending to be strong, but by being honest about their weakness. And the fire had loved them through it. As the tribe began to prepare breakfast using coals from the still-burning solstice fire, Kael caught his daughter Zara staring into the flames with a small smile on her face. "What is it?" he asked. "The fire is happy," she said simply. "It told me something." "What did it say?" "It said, now we're really friends, because friends see each other in the dark." Kael felt tears sting his eyes. His impossible discovery had started as a trick to survive, but it had become something much bigger, a way of living, a way of being honest, a way of facing darkness with light and community. They'd survive this winter, and every winter after, not because of some magic fire technique, but because they'd learned the deepest truth of all. You survive by being real, by caring, by seeing each other and allowing yourself to be seen. That was the real warmth, and it would never go out. Chapter 7. The Spreading Warmth. News of the tribe that talked to fire spread through the frozen lands like wildfire, ironically enough. Travellers who came to trade or seek shelter would return to their own tribes with incredible stories. "They never run out of firewood," they'd say. "Their fires burn all night without dying. Their children don't cry from the cold. It's like they've learned some kind of magic." But when asked what the magic was, the answer seemed too simple to believe. "They just talk to it," the travellers would explain. "They talk to their fires like they're people, and somehow it works." Most tribes dismissed this as nonsense. Fire was fire. Words wouldn't change its fundamental nature. But a few, the desperate ones, the ones who'd lost too many people to the cold, decided it couldn't hurt to try. A small tribe 3 valleys over was the first to attempt Kael's method. They sent a delegation to meet him and learn the technique properly. Kael welcomed them warmly and spent 3 days teaching them everything he knew. "It's not about the words," he explained to the skeptical hunters and elders. "The words don't matter as much as the feeling behind them. You have to genuinely care. You have to pay attention. You have to treat the fire like it matters, because it does." "But how do we know if we're doing it right?" one of them asked. Kale smiled. "You'll know. The fire will tell you. It might not happen the first night or even the first week. But if you keep trying, keep being honest and grateful, you'll feel the shift. And once you feel it, you'll never go back to the old way." The delegation returned home and began teaching their tribe. The first week was frustrating. Nothing seemed different. Their fires burned the same way they always had. Some people gave up immediately, declaring the whole thing foolish, but others persisted. On the 10th night, a woman named Sela sat by her family's fire, exhausted from another day of scraping by. She'd been trying the technique every night, feeling more ridiculous each time, but tonight she was too tired to care how she looked. "Fire," she said simply. "I'm so tired. If you're really listening, if this is really real, I could use some help. Just a little extra warmth tonight. Please." The fire flickered once, twice, then settled into a steady burn that felt somehow different from every other night. The warmth spread further than it should have. The light was softer, more golden, and Sela felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She called her mate over. "Feel this. Does the fire seem different to you?" He held his hands near the flames and his eyes widened. "It's warmer. How did you?" "I just asked," Sela said, wonder in her voice. "I just honestly asked, and it answered." Word spread through their camp that night. By morning, half the tribe was trying the technique with genuine belief. Within a week, their entire community had transformed. Fires burned better, tempers cooled, people smiled more. The cold was still there, but didn't feel quite as oppressive anymore. This pattern repeated itself across the region. Tribe after tribe heard the stories, tried the method, and experienced the same results. Some tribes adopted it quickly, others took longer, requiring proof after proof before they'd believe. But slowly, inexorably, the practice spread. An interesting thing started happening. As more tribes learned to talk to their fires, they also started talking more to each other. Old feuds began to resolve. Resources were shared more freely. The practice of gratitude and attention that they gave to their fires made them more generous and open-hearted with each other too. By the time spring finally arrived, melting the snow and bringing green back to the world, the entire region had changed. It wasn't just about fire anymore. It was about a complete shift in how people related to their world. They looked at everything differently now. The water they drank, the animals they hunted, the plants they gathered. If fire could listen, could respond to care and attention, then maybe everything could. Some tribes started thanking the trees before cutting them down for wood. "We need your warmth," they'd say. "Thank you for your sacrifice." They swore the trees fell easier. The wood split cleaner when approached with gratitude. Hunters began thanking the animals they killed, honoring their spirit before taking their meat. "You give your life so we can live," they'd say. "We don't take this for granted. We see you, we honor you." And they noticed that their hunts were more successful, the animals seeming to offer themselves more readily. Gatherers spoke to the plants they harvested. "Thank you for your roots, for your berries, for your leaves that heal. We're grateful." And the plants seemed to grow back faster, stronger, as if eager to provide for people who actually appreciated them. Was it all psychological? Were they just paying better attention and therefore being more successful? Or was there something deeper happening? Some real energetic exchange between humans and the natural world? Nobody could say for sure, but the results were undeniable. Life got easier. Survival became less desperate. The constant fear that had defined existence for so long began to ease. Kale, now becoming known as Kale the Firekeeper, travelled from tribe to tribe, teaching his method and learning from others. He discovered that different tribes had developed their own variations. Some sang to their fires, others drew pictures for them, some performed elaborate dances around the flames, turning fire tending into a nightly ceremony. All of it worked, because the core principle was the same: pay attention, be grateful, treat the world around you like it matters, care. One evening, Kyle sat with a group of children from various tribes, all gathered around a large bonfire. "Tell us the story," they begged. "Tell us how you discovered the talking fire." Kyle smiled and began the tale they'd heard many times but never tired of. He told them about the desperate winter, the dying embers, the moment when he decided to try something impossible. He told them about speaking to fire for the first time, about the warmth that responded, about learning that care was the most powerful force in the world. When he finished, one small boy raised his hand. "Kyle the Firekeeper, did you know this would happen? Did you know your discovery would spread to everyone?" Kyle shook his head. "No, little one. I just wanted to save my family. I had no idea it would become this." "But aren't you glad?" the boy asked. "Aren't you glad you've changed the world?" Kyle looked at the fire, at the dancing flames that seemed to listen to every word. "I didn't change the world," he said softly. "I just helped people remember something we'd forgotten, that we're not separate from the world around us, that everything is connected, that care matters. The world was always ready to respond. It just needed us to pay attention." The children nodded solemnly, understanding in their own way. They would grow up in a different world than their parents had. A world where talking to fire was normal, where gratitude was a daily practice, where the impossible was just something that hadn't been tried yet. And Kyle, watching them, felt a deep satisfaction. His family had survived that terrible winter, but more than that, he'd given the next generation a gift that would outlast any one lifetime. The knowledge that care is power, that attention is magic, that the world we live in is alive and listening and ready to respond. All we have to do is speak to it with honesty and love. Hit that subscribe button now if you haven't already, because I share these kinds of profound, relaxing stories every single week. And drop a comment telling me, what would you say to a fire if you knew it was listening? I'm genuinely curious. Chapter 8. The Test of Spring. When spring finally broke through, it came fast and furious. The snow melted in rushing rivers. Green exploded from the ground overnight. Birds returned in massive flocks, their songs filling the air. After the longest, hardest winter anyone could remember, the world seemed to exhale with relief. But the transition brought new challenges. The rivers swelled and flooded. Mudslides buried paths and destroyed shelters. The sudden warmth, while welcome, was so intense that it brought its own discomfort. And the fires, those faithful companions that had kept everyone alive through winter, suddenly seemed less necessary. This is when Kyle discovered something troubling. As the days grew longer and warmer, people stopped talking to their fires. Why bother? The cold was gone. Fire was needed only for cooking now, not for survival. The nightly rituals of gratitude and storytelling around the flames gradually dwindled. At first, Kale didn't think much of it. Spring had always been a time of celebration and activity. People were busy repairing winter damage, hunting fresh game, gathering new growth. They simply had less time for fire tending. But then things started going wrong. Small things at first. Cooking fires that wouldn't start properly. Smoke that blew into people's faces no matter which way the wind shifted. Embers that died overnight when they should have lasted until morning. The fires seemed uncooperative. One evening, Kael sat by his own family's fire, which had been burning strangely all week. The flames were weak and smoky, and no amount of dry wood seemed to make them burn cleaner. "What's wrong?" he asked the fire softly, falling back into the old practice. "Why are you struggling?" And in that moment of quiet attention, he understood. The fire was lonely. After months of constant companionship, of voices and stories and songs, the sudden sadness felt like abandonment. The fires hadn't changed, but the relationship had. And like any relationship that's neglected, it was suffering. Kael called the tribe together that evening. "We've made a mistake," he told them. "We thought fire only needed attention during winter when our survival depended on it. But fire doesn't work that way. Relationships don't work that way. You can't just care about someone when you need them and ignore them when you don't." Some people looked ashamed, realizing he was right. Others seemed confused. "But it's spring," one hunter protested. "We don't need the fires as desperately now." "Need isn't the same as care," Kael replied. "The fire didn't help us through winter because we needed it. It helped us because we cared about it. And now we've stopped caring, and it feels that. Everything feels that." He proposed that they continue the nightly fire circles, even in the warmth of spring, not out of necessity, but out of gratitude and relationship. "The fire was there for us when we needed it most," he said. "The least we can do is be there for it now." The tribe agreed, though some were half-hearted about it. That night they gathered around the central fire as they had throughout winter, but something felt different, forced. The gratitude that had been so genuine during the desperate cold now felt hollow. Zara, Kael's young daughter, stood up suddenly. "You're doing it wrong," she announced with the blunt honesty of children. "You're just saying words, you're not feeling them." "What do you mean?" her father asked gently. "The fire can tell the difference," Zara explained. "It knows when you really care and when you're just pretending. Right now, you're all pretending." An uncomfortable silence fell. She was right, and everyone knew it. During winter, every word had been genuine, born of desperate need and real gratitude. But now, in the comfortable warmth of spring, their thanks felt performative. Mara, the old elder, spoke up. "The child speaks truth. We've become comfortable, and comfort makes us forget. We think gratitude is something we practice only in hard times, but real gratitude, the kind that actually matters, is something we choose especially when we don't have to." "What do we do?" someone asked. "We have to find new reasons to be grateful," Kael said slowly, working it out as he spoke. "In winter, we thanked the fire for keeping us alive, but what do we thank it for now?" "For cooking our food," suggested a mother. "For giving us light when we want to talk after dark," added a young man. "For making shadows that dance," Zara said, smiling. "For being beautiful," Nira, Kael's mate, said softly. "I never thanked it just for being beautiful, but it is." One by one, people found new appreciations for the way fire made fresh fish taste, for how it kept night predators away, for the comfort of its presence even when not strictly needed, for the way children played in its light, for the stories it had witnessed, for being a constant in a world that constantly changed. As they spoke these appreciations, something shifted. The forced quality evaporated. The gratitude became real again, not born of desperation but of genuine appreciation, and the fire responded. The weak, smoky flames grew strong and clear. The warmth spread in that familiar, comfortable way. The colours brightened. Kael realised something profound in that moment. The practice of talking to fire had never been about survival. Not really. It was about relationship, about choosing to see the world as alive and responsive, about deciding that care and attention and gratitude were worthwhile even when not strictly necessary for survival. This was the real test. Winter had forced them to be grateful. Spring asked them to choose it freely. And that choice, that conscious decision to continue caring, even when it wasn't required, was what made the practice truly powerful. From that night on, the fire circles continued through spring, then summer, then through the mild autumn. By the time the first cold winds of the next winter arrived, the tribe's relationship with fire had deepened into something unshakable. They'd proven to themselves and to the fire that their care wasn't conditional. It wasn't just a survival strategy, it was a way of life. When that next winter came, it was still hard. Winter was always hard, but it didn't break them. Their fires burned strong and steady, and the tribe faced the cold with confidence born of a full year of maintained relationship. Other tribes heard about this and learned from it. The practice of fire tending became year-round, evolving from a winter survival technique into a constant spiritual practice, and the lesson spread beyond fire to every aspect of life. Gratitude practiced only in need wasn't really gratitude. Care given only when necessary wasn't really care. The things that mattered most had to be chosen freely, maintained consistently, regardless of circumstance. This was what Kael's impossible discovery truly meant. Not that humans could manipulate fire with words, but that we could choose relationship over utility, connection over exploitation, care as a practice, not just as a response to crisis. And that choice, repeated day after day, season after season, changed everything. Chapter 9. Oh, the gift that never dies. Years passed. Kael grew old. His children had children. The tribe expanded, split into several groups spread across the region. The practice of talking to fire spread even further, carried by travelers and traders until it was hard to find anyone who didn't know about it. But something interesting happened. As the practice spread and time passed, it began to change. Different groups developed different interpretations, different methods, different understandings of what it all meant. Some tribes treated fire as a god, building elaborate rituals around it. They appointed special fire priests who were the only ones allowed to tend the flames. They created rules about who could speak to fire and when and what words were acceptable. Other tribes went the opposite direction, making fire tending so casual that it lost its meaning. "Yeah, we talk to our fires," they'd say with a shrug. "Everyone does, no big deal." The gratitude became rote, the attention half-hearted. Kael watched these developments with mixed feelings. He was glad the practice had spread, but concerned about how it was being misunderstood. Finally, as he grew very old and felt his death approaching, he decided to make one last journey. He would visit as many tribes as he could and share the original story one more time, hoping to remind people what the practice was really about. Zara, now a grown woman with her own family, insisted on accompanying him. "You're too old to travel alone, father," she said firmly. "Besides, I was there at the beginning. I should be there for this, too." They visited tribe after tribe, and Kael told his story everywhere. The desperate winter, the dying fire, the moment he decided to try something impossible, the discovery that care and attention could change everything, and most importantly, that this wasn't about manipulating fire or controlling nature. It was about relationship, about seeing the world as alive, about choosing gratitude and care as a way of living. Some tribes received his message with joy and relief. "Yes," they said, "that's exactly what we'd been trying to say but couldn't find the words." They immediately dropped the excessive rituals or rekindled their fading practices. returning to the simple, genuine approach that had started it all. Other tribes resisted. The fire priest didn't want to give up their special status. "We've developed advanced techniques," they insisted. "We've taken your basic discovery and improved it, made it more powerful, more reliable." "But have you made it more real?" Kael asked gently. "Does your fire know it's loved? Or does it just know it's controlled?" The priests had no answer for that. But some of the common people heard Kael's words and began questioning the elaborate systems that had grown up around fire tending. Quietly, they started returning to simpler practices, speaking to their fires in their own words, treating them as companions rather than as gods or tools. On one of their stops, Kael and Zara stayed with a tribe that had completely misunderstood the practice. They'd heard that talking to fire meant giving it commands. "Burn hotter," they'd shout at their fires. "Don't go out, make more heat." Their fires were struggling, weak and rebellious, as if actively resisting their human masters. Kael asked if he could demonstrate the proper technique. That evening he sat by their central fire, which was smoking badly and barely producing any heat despite plenty of fuel. The tribe gathered around, curious and skeptical. "Watch," Kael said simply. Then he turned to the fire and spoke in the gentle tone he'd used that first desperate night decades ago. "Hello, fire. My name is Kael. I'm sorry you've been having such a hard time here. It must be frustrating to work so hard and get shouted at instead of thanked. I want you to know that I see you. I appreciate everything you do. Burning is a sacrifice. You give yourself away to create warmth for others. That's beautiful. That's generous. Thank you." As he spoke, the fire began to change. The smoke cleared. The flames grew taller, cleaner, brighter. The heat spread outward, touching everyone gathered around. By the time Kael finished, it was burning better than it had in months. The tribe stared in amazement. "How did you—" their leader began. "I didn't command it," Kael said. "I connected with it. There's a big difference. Commands might work for a little while, but connection works forever." That tribe completely changed their practice after Kael's visit. Within weeks, their fires were burning better than anyone could remember. More importantly, their whole attitude shifted. They stopped trying to control the world around them and started trying to connect with it instead. It changed everything about how they lived. As Kael's journey continued, he began to understand something new. His discovery was going to outlive him. It would spread across generations, constantly being reinterpreted, sometimes misunderstood, but never completely lost. The core truth was too powerful, too obvious once you experienced it. At his final stop before returning home, a young child approached him. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with wide dark eyes and tangled hair. "Are you the one who first talked to fire?" she asked. "I am," Kael confirmed, smiling at her. "My grandmother's grandmother learned from you," the child said proudly. "She taught my grandmother, who taught my mother, who taught me. We still do it the way you taught. Every night we sit with our fire and tell it about our day. And it listens. I know it does." Kael felt tears sting his old eyes. "Does your fire have a name?" he asked. The child nodded vigorously. "We call it Ember because that's what it always comes back to. Sometimes it's big and bright, sometimes it's tiny and glowing, but it's always Ember, always there, always listening." "That's beautiful," Kael said softly. "You understand it perfectly, better than some adults I've met. Never forget this feeling, little one. Never forget that the world is alive and listening." "I won't," she promised. "I'll teach my children and my children's children forever and forever." When Kael returned home, he was exhausted but satisfied. He'd done what he could. The practice would continue, would evolve, would sometimes be misunderstood, but would never truly die. Because it was based on something fundamental to human nature, the need to connect, to care, to be in relationship with the world around us. He died peacefully that winter, surrounded by his family, with a fire burning warm and bright beside him. Zara held his hand as his breathing slowed. "Thank you, Father," she whispered, "for teaching us how to stay warm." Kale smiled weakly. "I didn't teach you anything that wasn't already true," he murmured. "I just reminded you to pay attention." Those were his last words, and as he took his final breath, the fire beside him flared once, bright and beautiful, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. Before you continue, I need to ask you something. Hit that like button right now if this story has touched you in any way, and share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's forgotten how to pay attention, someone who's treating their life, their relationships, their world as tools instead of as connections. Send them this story. Trust me, they'll thank you. Now, let's finish this incredible journey together. Chapter 10: The Legacy of Light. Zara took over as the tribe's primary firekeeper after Kale died, but she didn't see herself as replacing her father. "My father didn't want to be replaced," she told the tribe. "He wanted everyone to be their own firekeeper, to have their own relationship with fire, with the world." She began teaching classes for young people, helping them develop their own practices. Some preferred singing to their fires, others liked telling stories. Some sat in silent meditation, just being present with the flames. All of it worked, as long as it was genuine. One day, a stranger arrived at the tribe's camp. She was from a place so far away that she'd been traveling for months. "I heard about this place," she said, "where people talk to fire, where the ancient practice is still alive. I want to learn it. I want to bring it back to my own people." Zara welcomed her warmly and began teaching her the basic principles. But after a few days, the woman grew frustrated. "I'm doing everything you said," she complained. "I'm being grateful. I'm paying attention, but my feta isn't responding the way yours does. What am I doing wrong?" Zara sat with the woman by her fire that evening and watched carefully as she performed the practice. The woman spoke all the right words, made all the right gestures, but Zara could see the problem immediately. "You're trying too hard," Zara said gently. "You're so focused on getting a result that you're not actually connecting. You're treating this like a technique instead of a relationship." "But it is a technique, isn't it?" the woman asked, confused. "A method for making fire burn better." "No," Zara said firmly. "That's what everyone gets wrong. My father didn't discover a technique. He discovered a truth, that everything in the world responds to genuine care and attention. The fire burning better is just a side effect of that truth. If you focus only on the side effect, you miss the whole point." "I don't understand," the woman admitted. Zara thought for a moment. "Tell me, do you have someone you love deeply? A mate, a child, a friend?" "My daughter," the woman said immediately. "She's back home, and I miss her every day." "When you're with your daughter, do you calculate exactly what words to say to make her happy? Do you perform gestures designed to manipulate her emotions?" "Of course not," the woman said, looking offended. "Then why are you doing that with fire? Love isn't a technique. Care isn't a manipulation. They're authentic states of being. When you're with your daughter, you just love her, naturally and genuinely. That's what fire wants too. Not a performance of gratitude, but real gratitude. Not calculated attention, but genuine presence. Understanding dawned in the woman's eyes. That night she sat by her fire and didn't try to do anything special. She just sat with it the way she'd sit with her daughter. Talked to it naturally about her day, her fears, her hopes. Shared her honest self without trying to achieve any particular outcome. And the fire responded, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Burned warmer, cleaner, as if it had finally been seen for what it really was. The woman stayed with the tribe for a month, deepening her practice. When she finally left to return home, she carried with her not a technique but a transformed way of being in the world. And she taught that transformation to her own tribe, who passed it on to others, and on and on. As years passed and Zara herself grew old, she watched the practice continue to spread and evolve. It had moved far beyond fire now. People were applying the same principles to everything. Hunters sat with the forest before hunting, thanking it for its gifts and asking what it needed in return. Gatherers spoke to the plants, creating relationships instead of just taking resources. Healers talked to the herbs they used, to the wounds they treated, even to the illnesses themselves. One young healer told Zara, "When I talk to a fever, when I ask it what it's trying to tell me instead of just trying to force it away, the healing happens faster and deeper. The fever isn't the enemy, it's the body's way of communicating. Everything is communication if we pay attention." This was the full flowering of Kyle's original discovery. Not just that fire could listen, but that everything could. That the entire world was engaged in constant communication, and humans had simply forgotten how to listen. Care was the language, attention was the practice, and the result was a completely transformed relationship with reality itself. When Zara was very old in her final days, her own daughter asked her, "Do you think grandfather knew his discovery would become this big, this important?" Zara smiled, her ancient face crinkling with joy. "I think he hoped. But more than that, I think he trusted. He trusted that truth, once revealed, can't be hidden again. That genuine connection is what humans have always been looking for. We just forgot where to find it." "And where do we find it?" her daughter asked, even though she knew the answer. "Everywhere," Zara said simply. "In fire, in water, in earth and air, in plants and animals, in each other, in ourselves. The world has always been alive, always been listening, always been ready to respond to care. We just had to remember to pay attention." She passed away peacefully that night, her hand resting near the fire that had burned beside her for 7 decades. And as she died, everyone swore they saw the fire dance, not in sorrow but in celebration, honouring the life of someone who had truly seen it. The practice continued, generation after generation. Sometimes it was forgotten in certain places and had to be rediscovered. Sometimes it was twisted into something it wasn't supposed to be and had to be corrected, but it never truly died, because it was based on something too fundamental, too essential to human thriving. Thousands of years later, people would still sit by fires, maybe in different forms, maybe in contexts Kyle could never have imagined, but the core would remain the same, the moment of quiet attention, the choice to see the world as alive, the decision to care, not because it was required, but because it was right. And on cold nights, when someone sits alone by a fire and feels that inexplicable comfort, that sense of companionship from the flames, they're experiencing the echo of Kyle's impossible discovery. The truth that was always true, just waiting for someone to notice it. That everything, absolutely everything, responds to genuine care. That the world is alive and listening. That warmth, real warmth, comes not just from heat, but from connection. And sometimes, if you're very quiet, very present, very willing to pay attention, you might feel it too. The fire listening, the world responding, the ancient warmth that has kept humanity alive since the very beginning. Not because we conquered it or controlled it, but because we learned finally to care for it. That was Kale's gift. Not a trick or a technique, but a reminder of what we'd always known in our hearts but forgotten in our minds. That love is the most powerful force in the world. That care changes everything. That paying attention, really paying attention, is the closest thing to magic that exists. The fire remembers. It has always remembered. We just needed someone brave enough to listen. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey tonight. If you made it all the way to the end, drop a comment right now and tell me your biggest takeaway from Kale's story. What will you pay more attention to tomorrow? What in your life needs more gratitude and care? And listen, if you've been having trouble sleeping, don't forget about that Caveman sleep challenge I mentioned at the beginning. The link is in the description. It's going to reset your sleep in 7 days using the exact same natural rhythms that Kael and his tribe lived by. Your ancestors slept better than you do. Let me help you get that sleep back. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications because every week I bring you stories like this. Stories that help you relax, make you think, and remind you of the incredible things humans are capable of. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's forgotten how to pay attention. Someone who's treating their world as a tool instead of a relationship. And remember, the world is listening. It always has been. All you have to do is care enough to notice. Sweet dreams, my friend. May your fires burn bright and your sleep be deep.